So one thing I talked about yesterday, I said I would bring up today. I don't know what you guys are doing for riser extension things for visionary lights. I've seen most of my competitors go out there, and I'm not going to pick on anybody or name names, but they go out and they buy 1.5-inch pipe at the big box store, carry it around in their truck, and then all of a sudden, you're putting in a $45,000 lighting system for somebody, and you get busted with a can of Krylon in your hand. You're like painting the pipes black on site. And what happens is, even if you use a really good like plastic paint they sell at Lowe's, then cutting it, moving it into place on the job site, you scratch it and getting black spray paint on their bushes and stuff, and it just stinks and it's a mess and you get all over you, and your homeowner doesn't like it. So what I thought about doing is I go to a pool supply place that sells solar equipment, because I thought they make the black pipe. It's almost as thick as the Schedule 80, like the original risers. It comes in 20-foot lengths. But the regular solar supply place for the do-it-yourselfer guy, they wanted like $2 a foot for the stuff, which isn't horribly cost prohibitive. I did some checking around and I found out, if you can finally find somebody that'll get you the wholesaler, tell them you're actually doing it for lights, you're not trying to compete with the solar industry, they'll go ahead and sell it to you. And I ended up buying like 1,000 feet of it at 80 cents a foot, loaded up on the top of the trailer on ladder racks, and took it back to the shop and cut it down into size. Then so what we do is we work out of a 12-foot box trailer behind the trucks. So I just go around the property and measure each one of the areas where the lights are going to go, kind of test the soil, see how far the stake needs to be into the ground to make sure that it's stable. Then we cut them on site, just a Sawzall, and cut it at an angle. I'm sure most of you guys do it differently. The regular stakes have a little slit there so that you can just let the wire come out of there and go into the ground. But as you guys know, a lot of times it's not acceptable to have that wire that close to the surface. So what we tried a couple times, of course, was running the wire underneath. And I'm sure everybody's tried that once, and then it cuts the wire and the light doesn't work anymore anyway. So every one of ours, we've just got like a little wood template kind of box made up where our stakes set down in it. And we just use a step bit, a 7/8 step bit by Greenlee. They last a long time. They are like $38 for one bit, but we use that in a lot of applications, and I'll show you some of those applications here in a minute. But one of them is these. As soon as we make all these just go on that template and just sit there and hit it with the drill. It takes like less than a half a second to drill that hole out, and then just fish the wire through. If the riser is too long to get the connection out where you can safely use your drum connectors, we butt connect the wire from the driver to a 16-gauge stranded wire, and then shrink wrap that so that it's in here. I haven't seen any problems with water intrusion or failures from that with having the shrink wrap on the 16-gauge to the driver in a dry location like that. It's above the terrain. So then you can just thread that through there and then beat this in. I'm sure you guys all do it just like we do. It's just a regular rubber mallet, bust this into the ground, and then put that back together. And we've been doing that for quite a long time, and I don't think that color is going to fail on these. I was looking at my neighbor's house, which is quite a bit older than mine, and they have the same solar system on their house for like 22 years. The pipe's still pretty dark and black. I'm sure it'll just be as good as long as the finish on the fixtures. I don't like to have lights off the ground. Obviously, they're more vulnerable to damage and to leaning and stuff like that. One of my competitors, they put them on risers like this everywhere, all over the yard. I try to encourage the homeowner to encourage their landscaper to trim around the light a little better, because again, you don't want it that vulnerable to damage and falling palm fronds and things like that. The specimens down here, usually people have like arbicolas or Exoras and things like that around palms, and so we'll put it in those applications. Or if you're doing like a wall washer and it's in shrubs or annuals, perennials, that kind of thing, we'll put them on that. And it's a little bit thinner than the regular mount, but we haven't had any trouble with it at all. Yeah, and the longer this is, of course, the more you want in the ground. Sometimes we'll use a drill or the Pickmatic to bust up some roots or rock or something that might need to get out of the way. I would try to encourage everybody to not use a long riser and just keep the shrubs trimmed away, and encourage your customer to do so, and do that with your maintenance plan that you have in place. What we do when we put them on risers, especially like a newer construction application, is take some of that 16-gauge wire, leave a foot and a half of it wound up inside of here, so when you go to, if you do need to change that, you don't have to rewire the whole thing and put new drum connectors, the gas-tight drum connectors, back in the ground and dig up stuff. 80% of our fixtures are adjacent to the structure. Within a couple feet of the footer of the house. Obviously, the trenching in most of our businesses, we're trenching adjacent to the exterior wall of the house where it doesn't need conduit. That in mind, I'm thinking, I see a lot of people, they get these nice transformers, and it's got that 1.25-inch knockout on the bottom of it, and they knock that knockout out and let the wires hang out of the bottom of the transformer to the ground. 1.25-inch pipe with the 1.25-inch mel adapter, put it on there. It costs you $1.50 in materials, and it looks nice. A lot of times what we'll do is I'll take that same step bit, and it goes down to 7/8 of an inch. And when you go all the way to 7/8 of an inch with that step bit, you'll have a hole big enough to accompany the 1/2-inch conduit pipe. So then you can still make your connection here and heat shrink it like I was talking about. Mount the fixture into the ground, beat this in there, fish your wire out, and then place the conduit into here, fish the wire through that, and take the conduit to a safe location. Doesn't have to go all the way back to the transformer, of course, but for instance, we did a commercial application a couple of weeks ago. It was several cul-de-sacs and a big entry to a community, and they had tons of flower beds at the front. So each one of those, it runs from the light fixture or from the base there to where the base of the sign is for the neighborhood or the wall that we're illuminating. I talked a little bit about core drilling. This is one of my favorite ones because it's an affordable drill or angle grinder. This is a variable speed. If you're going to be drilling into somebody's Saturnia, travertine, or even like the overlay pavers that are thinner and much more susceptible to breaking and chipping, you don't want to use a hammer drill. I told you guys yesterday, I learned that the hard way. I didn't screw up the marble head on the big gazebo, but it was something that I did for days, you know, drilling with a regular drill, but not on hammer drill, so I didn't chip it. This particular core drill bit that we use is on that paper in your folder, and so is this particular angle grinder. Started out on the lowest setting. Something that you want to practice if you guys aren't doing it yet. You want to practice at home or on a piece of paver somewhere, not on a 15-year-old home where they only got like 3 extra pavers. When you have it on the lowest speed with the angle grinder, get a hold of it real firm and take it at a little bit of an angle, and just barely take 15-20% of the corner of that core bit against the paver, and then roll into it. So yeah, if you go in there at just a little bit of an angle and then roll into it, because especially if you're not real well, haven't had a lot of experience with one of these, you try to put that thing straight down on it, you're just going to spin off and tear up all kinds of stone or pavers, right? So just real gentle roll into it. Now you want to make sure that you are dead center, perfectly level once you start to drill in there, because you get that cavity too big, and then all of a sudden the cavity is a little bit off and too big to even, the flange of the mini well light's not going to cover it. What's really cool is this particular drill bit size. It's great also for installing the X-Lights. What we do for our X-Light installation with these is I'll take in and go about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches deep. That'll accompany the grommet.